I guess that our audience is coming by. So today I will be in both roles, moderator and speaker. So for the beginning, I would like to introduce our guest from sunny and not very sunny Singapore, Deputy CEO Land Transport Authority company, organization. As far as I understand, it's a Ministry of Transport. So Deputy General Director Mr. Kheng, Chong. And today we will talk about long-term transport strategies development. So in Singapore, it was already formed for the long-term development. In Moscow, we don't have it as of now, but still we have the plans how to develop the central transport hub, kind of conversations about the plan. So, and right now I would like to give a floor to Mr. Kheng to present transportation plan of Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel, for the kind introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be able to come here to share with you about Singapore's Land Transport Master Plan. We call it Land Transport Master Plan 2040 because the vision, the horizon for this plan we're looking at is for the year 2040. Okay, let's see. Okay. Okay. Now, to start out the presentation, I would just like to introduce Singapore. Some of you may not be familiar with us. We are actually more than 8,000 kilometers away from Moscow to the southeast. It is one of the most densely populated city-state or countries in the world, because we do have a population of 5.6 million, but occupying a very small land area of 724 square kilometers. And if you look across, the length of Singapore Island is about 49 kilometers, and from north to south is only about 25. And you look below, we have what we call the Central Business District, which is actually located in the south of Singapore. For comparison, Moscow has a land area of 2,500 square kilometers and a population of 12.5 million. Now, because of our very small land area, and to support our population and to support a good quality of living as well as the economy growth, Singapore has to have a very efficient land transport system. And we cannot continually build roads to support private transport simply because already our land transport infrastructure occupies about close to 12 to 13% of our land area. And we look at housing takes out about 14%. So we are already very heavily using our land space. So therefore, we have to focus our attention on public transport. And in Singapore, public transport is made out of three elements: the bus system, which carries about 4 million daily; our rail system, which carries about 3.7 million or 3.6 million daily; and also the third mode of transport is what we call a sharing, the taxis, the private hired cars, the equivalent of your Uber and Yandex. And public transport is a very important element of Singapore's land transport system because it's the most efficient way of carrying people around, most reliable, safer, and more importantly, it's very affordable. We have also in parallel, for the private transport side, we have done some measures to actually reduce the reliance on private transport. So maybe I'll show you the next slide. We believe that the fundamental strategies for sustainable transport in Singapore are in these areas. Firstly, integrated planning. Our land transport system must be planned in tandem with the land use plans. So in other words, we will be along right at the very beginning as our land use planners think about how the land should be used, whether it's for residential, whether it's for industries, whether it's for schools, whether it's for parks, or whether it's for all sorts of businesses. We are there. And any owning of new development areas will be accompanied by a suitable transport system to support it. So integrated planning is very important. Planning that involves us planning with other government agencies so that our transport facilities can integrate with the developments. Next very important strategy is more connections and better service on our public transport. If the vision is to move people over to public transport, then you must make your public transport so accessible with excellent connectivity between the rail, the bus, and the developments, good service, good reliability standards, and very good first mile, last mile connections. I'm not sure whether you're familiar. Singapore weather is a very hot climate. We are located in the equatorial region, very hot, but at the same time very wet. It rains all the time. So how do we make sure that people can get from their homes to our public transport system and go to their workplace, and similarly doing the reverse journey? So first mile, last mile. We also believe that land transport can provide a different experience. It's not just a transport system, but we want a good mobility experience for our Singaporeans. So we built a livable and inclusive community by providing, first of all, barrier-free access. So we allow a very inclusive system where people from, whether you're less able or the elderly, that you do have ability to use our land transport system conveniently. And we also reclaim the land from cars. So we take back the roads and we build them into paths where we can allow them for active mobility, for cycling, for shared transport. And just now I mentioned that we want to rely or minimize the reliance on our private transport. How do we do that? I'm not sure whether you're aware that Singapore is probably one of the most expensive countries in the world to own a car. Because before you can own a car, you have to go and bid for a certificate before you can start owning the car. So you have a certificate that you go by open bidding, and then you go and buy the car. And that's not all. We do have what we call an electronic road pricing system, which is a quite well-renowned congestion management system that were implemented since 1997. And this allows us to make sure that the roads, the key road stretches during the peak hours are comfortable for use, not just by cars, but for people who need to use them, but also by public buses. So this is a very key component, and hence, if private transport is very expensive, then we have to make sure that alternatives are available, and that's why we need a very good and affordable public transport system. So, since the start of LTA was formed in 1996. It's a very young company, but actually the history goes before that. Before that, land transport was actually run by 4 different agencies. We have our Public Works Department who builds the roads, our MRTC that builds the mass rapid transit system, the subways. We have the Registry of Vehicles that control private transport in terms of the taxation and the ownership. And we do have another one called the Ministry of Land Transport Policy Division, which talks about land transport policy. So in 1996, we came together. Rather, 1995 September, we came together. And we started off with the first white paper in 1996, which articulated the vision for the land transport system for Singapore. We had a major review carried out in 2008, and this was one of the very significant master plan where we now have a very comprehensive MRT system network which actually articulates the plans in terms of the lines that we're going to build. And that was in 2008, where the government committed up to Singapore dollars 60 billion for MRT systems. Then we decided that the environment was changing very rapidly. So in 2013, we came up with a review, and we call it Master Plan 2013. This was at a time where we were having challenges with our existing rail lines because they were aging. And so we needed to find a way to improve our MRT systems and our public transport systems so that our vision of having more people use it can be realized. Just to share with you, in 2013, what we articulated was that our MRT system would double its distance, the network, in 2013 by the year 2030, 2030. We will double the network. And by then, we expect the modal split between public transport and private transport to go up to 75-25. 75% for public transport, 25% for private transport during the peak hours. We also have a very ambitious plan, which is by 2030, 8 in 10 households in Singapore will be within a 10-minute walk of an MRT, LRT station. That was our vision that we set out in 2013, a master plan, with the planning horizon being up to the year 2030. This year, we launched our next review. We call it LTMP 2040. Now we have changed the name a bit. Now we decide to articulate the year that we're looking at. So LTMP 2040, we're looking at the year in 2040 where we expect that certain targets will be set out, which I'll share with you later. How did we come up with these plans? It was not just dreaming out of in our own office. We actually conducted a lot of focus group discussions. We engaged more than 7,000 over people from the various industry and the public. And we formed an advisory panel to help to guide the discussion and shape them. And basically, through this discussion, we came up with what we call our key thrusts for LTMP 2040. And the first two are the key ones. You will look at it. First, we have a 20-minute town and a 45-minute city. I'll share this later. Transport for all. And transport all, we refer to the ability for our people, for all our people to be able to use our public transport system. And of course, we also in the process want to promote healthy living and safer journeys. So by 2040, we envisage that there will be 20-minute towns where all journeys to our neighborhood centers are using walk, cycle, ride, can be completed in less than 20 minutes. Okay, in Singapore, we do have towns, satellite towns where there are what we call estates. And each of these estates, you have a town center in the middle. So this plan will allow all journeys from anywhere in the town to reach the town center using walk, cycle, ride in less than 20 minutes. So for example, if we look at a picture here, we have schools, we have the polyclinics, our hawker centers, the food centers, the parks, retail shops, and the houses to go to a neighborhood center in 20 minutes. And a 45-minute city, which brings you to anywhere in Singapore. 9 in 10 peak hour journeys that you use a walk, cycle, ride mode, i.e. you use the MRT systems, or you use cycling or walking or shared transport modes, you can complete it in less than 45 minutes. So this will allow you to go to where you work from, whether it's from your homes or from where you work to other areas in the regional centers and business nodes. To do that, 45-minute city, it actually requires us to put heavy investment by the government in particularly the rail infrastructure, because that is the one that actually can bring you to the where you want to go in the quickest manner. So just now I shared that by 2030, we will have a network up to 360 kilometers, and we will reach about 400 kilometers by the year 2040. So the plan that you see in the map, you look, is quite populated with lines. The existing lines, which is currently about 229 kilometers, and there are some lines that are currently being built, and there are some lines that will be further built. But other than just building, we need to make sure that our systems are reliable, and now we're also spending quite a lot of money by the government to actually renew the existing, especially the very first lines. We need to replace the track works, the power systems, the track circuit, the signaling system. We're buying new trains. And more importantly, we want the rail reliability to be very high. Okay, from a target of, currently we're achieving about 700,000 train kilometers between failures. We want to reach a target of 1 million MKBF, mean kilometer between failure. And that's a very tall order, but we think we can make it, and this will require consistent investment and maintenance. But we also want our system to be inclusive, and therefore we want to also shape our user behavior. We want our commuters to be more gracious, whether it be queuing, helping, giving up seats, giving them more resting points, more accessibility, and especially for the, what we call that, wheelchair access. So we have a barrier-free access. And I noticed that actually it's very important. Our stations are equipped with many lifts and many escalators that can allow elderly and those who are less able to use the system quite easily. And we do have guide systems where for the visually impaired, from the lifts, how to go to the right cabin so that they know which car has, for example, the facility that they can use. The third strategy that I talked about just now, healthier, cleaner, and safer streets. I think we are reclaiming land back from the cars, from the roads, to be able to use for public transport. Public transport is certainly more efficient. It is cleaner. And we envisage by 2040, our public bus fleet will be entirely used with cleaner technologies. So they're either electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. And we want to also develop a system which is safe for use. So we know that accidents are inevitable, but we think we can make effort to minimize them and eventually aim for zero accidents. The process of LTMP development in this instance was a co-creation effort with Singaporeans. It's a very important message that we're sending out to Singaporeans, that it's not just about building something for you, but it's building something with you, but also for you. So over time, the people element has become more and more important, because we believe that only if people have a stake in it, that they have a hand in developing system, would they be prepared to use it and prepared to take care of it. So it's a cultural change. The LTMP is a transformation process for us to actually shape the public behavior. And in Singapore, public transport is very political. For 3 elections, we have lost 3 transport ministers. So we can't have a fourth one. So this is very important. So finally, I think this is what we aim to have: a vision, healthy, safe, 20-minute town, 45-minute city for all. By 2040, we're working hard to it. It's not easy, but we think we can achieve it in time. And really, if you're interested to find more about this LTMP 2040, please visit the URL link below or scan the QR code. All right, on this note, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kheng.
Yeah.
Before I start to present my own presentation, I would like to ask you one question. Yes. I think this is quite an ambitious plan, yes. And you will need lots of investment, and not only private investment, but also investment from the government. How do you manage to negotiate with the government to allocate this money to this plan? Is it difficult in Singapore?
I think the government takes a very holistic view. When you have a good public transport, it actually helps to also spur development. It also helps to spur development, and development also with it. So with the investment, there are benefits. The benefits of capturing the land value, so that you can invest, and not just for land transport, but also for other users. So we think that it's a win-win. But land transport is so critical for Singapore because we are a very small island, and we need it so that people can be mobile, and we want them to be able to enjoy a higher quality of living. So there are more than just tangible benefits in terms of return investment, but also the feeling that actually we are progressing as a country. The quality of living is good, better. Economy is growing, and we are, going towards a stage where, if we can avoid even the need to own cars, it may actually help them to actually lower the cost of living.
Thank you very much. Further, I will speak in Russian because most of auditorium is Russian-speaking, so yeah. Как приятно послушать, что есть страны.
It is delightful to hear that there are countries where economy is growing and life is getting better and better. We are also in a fairly good situation, and I'll try to be brief in my presentation. Indeed, currently we do not have a document that would in detail outline our long-term transportation strategy. So we don't have that in place for Moscow and adjacent territories, but Moscow is 3.5 times bigger than Singapore, and population-wise it's twice as big than Singapore. So population density there is higher, and also we have Moscow region, and Moscow region is 70 times bigger than Singapore. So we have to cover a lot bigger territory, which accommodates around 20 million people, 12 for Moscow and 7.5 million for the region. So the mayor of Moscow calls Moscow the transportation hub for the region, and we have a very ambitious task now, which is developing as transportation strategy, the strategy which will be tailored to the interests of all our users. And this map shows congestion rate of different roads. So highlighted in red are those the motor roads, and highlighted in blue are the railways. So we can see how congested both the road and railway network is. This is transportation accessibility. So we can see some efforts in terms of improving our bus service and railroad service. So as far as we can see, we have bus services available in cities which are located within 2-hour drives away from Moscow. So we can see that the economy is cooling down now in the Moscow region. Population density outside of Moscow is 5 times less than that inside. In the Moscow region, we have a lot more residential property commissioned than the amount of residential property built and commissioned inside Moscow, and the cost of life, taking into account that fixed parameters vary to a great extent. Like take Mytishchi or Krasnogorsk, for example, and you will see that life there is cheaper. So it's better to live there since the cost is less, and this is why people are moving to those territories. This map shows the difference in productivity in different parts of Moscow region and a comparison with Moscow salaries. So all these things put together result in the fact that there are some unprecedented flows, but unprecedented passenger traffic going from and to Moscow, like Vladimir, for the city of Vladimir. People live in Vladimir, but they commute to Moscow, and it takes 3 hours by train to get from Vladimir to Moscow. Downtown of Moscow still remains one of the destinations, one of the key destinations, and also we see that transportation network is overloaded. So people are standing all the way on their way to Moscow in the train, and in some cases it's even very difficult to get in the rail car. So these charts show breakdowns of this passenger traffic by type. There is some swing migration, that's the red bar. There are people commuting to their country houses, and people with using public transport with some other missions. So mobility in Moscow transportation hub is a quickly changing parameter. Here we can see the changes which happened just within 5 years. Some of these indicators have changed by 60 or 80%. So once you open a railway station or a subway station, that has an immediate effect on the layout of the transportation network. At the peak hours, our system is overloaded, but this is, I think, a general case. But in some on some lanes, the network is overloaded 8 times on top of its peak capacity. And please pay attention to the different types of mobility which is there in Moscow. Let's take a look at the mobile data. We can see that the situation is being smoothed out, so this chart shows the number of people commuting to Moscow for work and coming to Moscow for some other purposes. In order to get a fair idea about present-day mobility in Moscow, we try to use modern technologies. So this is Google location history. We can pick up a respondent and track location of this respondent and what the transportation means a particular person was using in order to get where he or she wants to get. So this kind of data, partially provided by mobile operators, helps us state that mobility in the future will change a lot. Currently, we have a smaller number of these swing migrants, swing commuters. More and more people do not have to show up in the office by 9 o'clock in the morning. People are ready to spend more time commuting to work, provided that they don't have to take an overcrowded train. So the more comfortable is the transport, then the more willingly the people want to take it. For example, Lastachka, the high-speed train, Lastachka train going to Tver is 3 times more expensive than the normal train fare. However, people are taking it very willingly. People get used to new types of mobility, car sharing, for example. In terms of the spread of car sharing services, Moscow is well ahead of any other megalopolis in the world. Mobility from the standpoint of multimodal concept is also changing. People consider the interchanging site as a public space, and that creates seamless experience in terms of switching from subway to railway or other way around. I'd like to say a couple of words regarding our vision and the territory which I showed you on the map, which covers over 200,000 square kilometers, is not homogeneous. And the first scenario is when we keep doing the same thing as we are doing now, and we are focusing. So cost of life in the city is becoming higher and higher, and a lot of residential property is being commissioned in smaller towns outside Moscow, and this is changing the passenger traffic layout, and transportation system is not adapting to this quick enough. So we have taken the demographic forecast prepared by the Russian Office of Statistics, and we try to prepare an outlook as to where the population growth in Moscow region is supposed to take place. So if this scenario is valid, then 1 million, there will be one more. The population around Moscow will shortly increase by another 1 million people. So this is why the Moscow government is currently introducing trains which are going not to the railway station as a destination, but through the city, crossing the city from left to right and from top to bottom. But this is not enough. These newly commissioned trains are not enough to absorb the passenger traffic flow. However, there is an alternative scenario under which we'll focus on developing the center of Moscow. And population densities, Moscow is well below that of Singapore, and there are territories which can be developed. There are territories where more people can live, and these are industrial territories which are left over by which we inherited from the Soviet times, and these territories are currently being redeveloped. We have good examples of that. And in this case, we should shift our investment effort. We should focus our investment on completing the transportation loops inside the center of Moscow. We can adopt something like the Crossrail project, which they have in London, UK. So we can provide a lot better connectivity inside the city. We can set up more centers which would attract more jobs. Another scenario is the suburban scenario, where more and more people will acquire residential property 30 or 60 kilometers away from Moscow, and that will be low-rise development, which means that these people will have to commute to Moscow for work. And we need to provide them with an opportunity to get access to the public transportation system. And the final scenario is the Metropolitan Scenario. Within this scenario, we have to provide the right connectivity to all the cities and towns which are located within the radius of 120 kilometers away from Moscow. And we have to provide high-speed transportation options there. Probably in its full form, it may not be that viable, but we keep this option in mind. Thank you very much.